Hi, this is the start in a series of videos that's going to explore some of the core English skills that are essential to performing well in English assessments. Today's lesson is going to be writing an introduction 101 using IRCA or IRCA. This is going to help you understand the structure that goes into an introduction and the things that you're going to need, essentially the bits of the puzzle that go towards actually writing an introduction. Essentially, we're going to need 4 bits of the puzzle to form the introduction, and they are represented by the 4 letters or the 4 words of ICA, which is an acronym that stands for introducing the text, reference the prompt, contention, and outlining your 3 main arguments. I'm going to go through each of those 4 components and explain exactly what you need to do. I'm going to provide some sentence starters that you can use to help you get a head start with your introduction. And I'm also going to provide multiple examples of full introductions and of the individual sentences that are representative of these 4 letters. Essentially, what this introduction is going to represent is everything that you need to perform to write an introduction. It's going to help you to introduce the text. It's going to help you to establish your knowledge of the text. It's going to help you outline your key idea and the overarching argument that you're going to be making. And it's also going to help you and facilitate your 3 ideas that you'll be discussing in your 3 body paragraphs. And essentially, these are the key components and the key purposes of an introduction. It's establishing those key ideas, it's introducing your knowledge of the text, and it's making sure that you have a clear understanding of what the prompt is. So we're going to show you here an example of an introduction, and this is what we're going to be working through. I'd like to stop right now, have a read through the introduction. We're going to go through each of these steps, and this is what we're going to be looking for. So the first thing that you want to do is introduce the text. Now, our prompt for this exercise is, despite their experience of loss, the characters in 9 days find ways to make life meaningful. Discuss. The first thing that you want to be doing is you want to introduce the text. And this is really simple. You just need to introduce the key information, in this case, about 9 days. So this will include the title of the text, it will include the author's name, and it will include the type of text. So you don't want to just say text, 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 text all the time. You want to make sure that you're saying novel or graphic novel if it is Persepolis. And this is really going to just help you just to get onto that meta language and just draw those connections to the key terms of English. The first thing that you want to do is making sure that you're introducing the text. And that's just simple title, author's name, and the type of text. Simple sentence starter for this could be something like, Tony Jordan's novel 9 Days explores how. Now, you'll notice here that we have the author's name, Tony Jordan. We have the text type, novel, and we have the actual title of the text, 9 Days. This would, of course, change for the various texts that we're going to do. Now, there's many, many ways that you can do this, and this is just a suggestion. It's just a sentence starter if you're a little bit stuck. So let's look at some examples. Here we have 2 prompts. One is a prompt about Kip and how he deals with grief. The second one is about power, the power of family. So our examples. For the prompt which is about Kip and how he deals with grief, you're introducing the text sentence could sound like, Tony Jordan's novel 9 Days explores how the character Kip deals with the grief he experiences throughout his life. It was about the prompt about family, so the power of family. It would be Tony Jordan's novel 9 Days explores the dynamics of a family over multiple generations. You can see with both of these examples, they're just introducing the text, but they're also just providing that little connection to the prompt as well. So it's not just a vague statement about the text, it's actually making sure that your assessor is aware that you know what you're talking about or what the prompt is that you're going to be writing about. Of course, you could word this differently. You start by mentioning 9 days. So in 9 Days, a novel by Tony Jordan, she explores how the character Kip deals with the grief he experiences throughout his life. So there's many different ways you can phrase it. Phrase it in the novel 9 Days by Tony Jordan is explored the dynamics of a family over multiple generation is discussed, something along those lines. So there's many different ways we can do this, and all we really want to do is make sure we're mentioning text, title, text type, and the author name. Okay. From here, we're going to move in to the second thing that you need to do. Actually, that I was going to do this as well. So this is an example for the actual prompt that we had at the top of our page here. So despite their experiences of loss, the characters find ways to make life meaningful. Discuss. So here we have the key words of this prompt are experiences of loss, and also we would say that it is making life meaningful. So we just want to choose one of those that's going to be the thing that we are connecting in with the author's name, the text type, and the title. So we've said Tony Jordan's novel 9 Days explores how loss impacts 4 generations of an Australian family. We're just providing an opening sentence, explains the text, it draws a connection with the prompt so that we can actually launch in to a proper discussion of what the prompt is asking us. We've made the suggestion here, but the main point of the prompt is about loss. You could just as easily say that the main part of this prompt is meaning and the meaning of life, that sort of thing. And that would just slightly change the wording, but it's still going to have the same meaning and the same way that you kind of phrase it. So our first sentence, this is our opening sentence. We're just introducing the text. Tony Jordan's novel 9 Days explores how loss impacts 4 generations of an Australian family. We now move on to introducing the text to referencing the prompt. In this sentence, we're just making reference to the prompt. We're making it clear that we have an understanding of what the prompt is actually asking us. Or you're defining the key words if the prompt is unclear, or you're explaining how the keyword or the theme relates to the text. You don't have to do all of these. You can choose just one. Sometimes you're going to be choosing two. It's totally up to you. It's how your introduction is going to flow. And this is just going to come through. So our first sentence is just introducing the text. Our second is referencing the prompt. We want to make sure that when we reference the prompt, we're either outlining your understanding of the prompt. Now, a sentence starter for that is within the text, family relates to. You could define the key words of the prompt if they are unclear. Okay. Sometimes you'll have a key word such as family that you might want to explore and explain exactly what you mean by family. Do you mean family as in just the blood relatives, or do you mean the extended family of and all the people that the protagonist loves? In this case, you would be using the sentence starter. The notion of family is explored throughout the text by being defined by all the people that the protagonist loves, for example, or cares about. Third one is explain how the keyword or the theme relates to the text, and this could use the sentence starter within the text. Jordan presents generations of the Westaway family. And then you would extend what exactly is being commented on. So you'd be drawing a connection to the actual, whether it's loss, or whether it's life meaning, or whether it's love, or whether it's grief, or whether it's tragedy, whatever it is. Two examples here. The first one, again, is about the prompt of family. The second one is about the prompt of Kip and his struggles. So you might want to, if the prompt is about family, make it clear that within the text, family doesn't just mean blood relatives, but all of those people who are important to the protagonist. In that case, your second sentence would sound like, within the text, Jordan makes it clear that family doesn't just relate to blood relatives, but more broadly, to all people close to the protagonist. If you were writing about Kip and his struggles, you might want to provide the context of the struggles he faces, and how these struggles are presented in the text. In that case, you would say within the text, Kip is forced to constantly struggle against the pressure of society and the tragic fate his family faces. This is explored from the perspective of various members of Kip's family. So here, we've done two of these introductions. I haven't just explained what connection to the text is, but we've also provided a little bit of insight into how this struggle is explored, which is in the second sentence. Now, this section is not 100% necessary, and if you do get stuck on this in your essay or in your CAT, you are free to skip it as long, and this is a very strong as long as you have mentioned in this first sentence, because these can be just taken together, but it can be very useful and it can make your introduction clearer if you separate them out. One, because it's just providing that extra layer of depth that you're explaining and the additional context. Okay? But like I said, you can all complete the introduction of the text and the introduction of the prompt in the same sentence. So, how did we go about finding a reference to the prompt for our target prompt, which again is despite their experience of loss, the characters within 9 days find ways to make life meaningful. Discuss. Again, we started off by mentioning loss, and now we want to bring in a discussion of things that make life meaningful, or the ways that the characters find ways to make life meaningful. We would have something like this. Jordan is able to detail how life is made meaningful for individuals despite their loss by exploring the individual perspectives of the 9 different family members. Or you could say the perspectives of 9 different members of the Westaway family. Something along that lines would be fine. Take note here that you've now mentioned not just loss, which was in your first sentence, but also the idea of life being made meaningful for individuals, which is in this sentence. And you've also connected it in with the notion of loss, because you've said despite loss. Thirdly, you've also explored, or you've provided a little bit of context about how that is achieved in the text. In this case, it is the individual perspectives of 9 different family members. And that's really helpful context just to help clarify our understanding of the text and the meaning that we are trying to convey that we have about the text. So far, we've included our introduction of the text and our references to the prompt. We now moved into our outlining of the contention. So what you'll have noticed here is that we start out really big we're talking about the whole text, then we spring it in a little bit. We're talking about a particular theme or a couple of particular themes. Now, our next step is what do we think the author is saying about those two themes? In this case, the two themes that we're going to be looking at are loss and the ways that characters find meaning and make their own lives meaningful. So in your contention, you want to outline your main idea. This is essentially just the contention that you are attempting to argue or discuss. So contention just means your main idea. The idea that you're trying to argue or discuss in the entire body paragraph. Your contention will be a statement that you should relate to throughout each body paragraph. So each topic sentence needs to relate back to your contention. Your links or linking sentences can relate back to your contention. So it's important that you do have a contention that is strong. It should provide focus, but be broad enough to enable 3 different topic sentences to be drawn from it. So you don't want it overly specific, so you don't really have any room to have different ideas. You are essentially stating what the author is saying about the prompt. You need to ask yourself, what does Jordan say about the experience of loss and how characters find ways to make their own lives more meaningful despite loss? That's the question that we are attempting to ask and that we are attempting to answer in our contention. Some sentence starters that you could use include, throughout the text, Jordan argues that. Throughout the text, Jordan makes the suggestion that. You can substitute the author name Jordan with the text name. So throughout 9 days, it is argued that throughout 9 days, the suggestion is made that. So you can substitute, if you've used the author's name too much, to just substitute the title. You could also potentially say the text. So the text makes the argument that, etc. So we can substitute words here so we're not being repetitive. Some examples. Now remember, these statements are providing a holistic answer to the prompt. So if it's a prompt about how Kip deals with grief, you'd want to make sure that you're talking about both Kip and grief in your contention. So we've started with our sentence starter. Throughout the text, Jordan makes the suggestion that Kip's grief provides the launching pad for him to become a better person. All this is saying is that Kip deals with grief by making himself a better person. That's how he overcomes it. The important thing is thinking about whether we could come up with 3 ideas for this. And in the next slide, I'm going to show you how you can come up with those 3 ideas. The next prompt is about the power of family. In this case, you just want to make sure that we're discussing or we're mentioning family and its power. In this case, a contention might sound something like, throughout the text, Jordan states that family is essential in providing an identity for the characters. Now tomorrow, I'm going to create a bit of a video like this for how to write your contentions, which I know is quite difficult. I know that we've gone over it before, but I think that it's something that is important for me to discuss in a short little video like this again. So don't worry if you're not all the way around contentions, because there should be, or there will be, a video about it. So how would we go about writing a contention for our target prompt? Again, despite their experience of loss, the characters find ways to make life meaningful. Now remember, we've established already that this prompt is about an exploration of loss across the generations of the Westerways and how, despite that loss, the characters make life meaningful. We'd want to make sure that we are identifying or mentioning loss and also what the meaning does for them, how they're able to connect loss, and despite the fact that it leads to grief, tragedy, and trauma and heartbreak, they're still able to come out the other side and make life meaningful. Something like this could be something that you could launch from. 9 Days details how each of the characters are shaped by the consequences of loss. And it is these consequences, both negative and positive, that provides meaning for the characters throughout their lives. So this is just saying that it is loss and the consequences of loss, whether they're negative or positive, that provides meaning for the characters throughout their lives. Now, grappling with writing your contention is probably the most difficult part of writing your introduction. So it's something that I think that you need to make sure that you're practicing. You don't necessarily have to practice entire essays or entire body paragraphs or entire introductions. You could potentially just work on doing plans, coming up with contentions, coming up with arguments. Okay, that's one way that a lot of students practice. Because it can take you a long time to write an essay, but it's really short to come up with a plan, to come up with contention, argument, argument, argument. It's a lot easier. So my suggestion would be that if you do want to have a short amount of time, maybe you're on the bus, just have a look at a prompt and come up with a bit of a plan for what you would say as your contention and your arguments. And you could even look at the sentence that you would use to introduce the text and the sentence you would use to reference the prompt. So you don't necessarily have to write an entire introduction, but you can just have dot points for the things that you would say. So this leads into our arguments. So our arguments are the A in IRCA or IRCA. ISA. In this section, you want to outline the arguments, the ideas that you are going to be discussing in each of your body paragraphs. You're essentially providing an overview of what you're going to be saying. You're essentially establishing in your assessor's mind that you have a plan going forward, and this is what you're going to be saying. Your arguments should support your contention. That's the point of them. They're your arguments. You're arguing for your contention. They need to be explored, one for each body paragraph. They also need to be succinctly outlined, all three of them, in a few sentences. I'm going to show you how to do this in one sentence, but I've seen students who just have 3 sentences. Sometimes that can be a little bit clunky, but it can be effective as well. Now, sentence starters for your arguments can be a little bit more difficult because you're essentially launching off your contention. But a nice sentence starter could be something like, this notion is explored within the text through, and then you're essentially listing or outlining your 3 ideas. So let's have a look at our examples. We have our prompt about Kip and grief. We have our prompt about the power of family. Note that I included the contention for each of these examples just because they're important in just providing that context for the actual arguments that we're looking at. And essentially, sentences need to run into one another and they need to complement each other. So because your arguments are essentially supporting your contention, I've included it there just to help you see the connection which is there. So for the prompt about Kip and how he deals with grief, you have the idea that Kip and his grief provides a launching pad for him to become a better person. So we've identified that he's becoming a better person because, and there's many ways that he's becoming a better person because of his grief. We could say that his grief leads to him providing more support for those around him. So Connie, he sees Connie not receiving support. That leads to a sense of grief within him. And as a consequence, he decides to provide more support for his own family. He also becomes more determined for himself to succeed. And that could just be in order to honour her memory. But it's that grief which is pushing him forward, you could make the argument. And also, it's the idea that he's developing a strong identity for himself and for his identity and for his family. So the West way develops traditions and it develops these mementos such as the pendant and the photograph and the coin. So these relics become connections between all the members of the Westaway family. And they bind them together and they unify them with the same sort of values and the same sort of traditions. So that would be your three ideas. And we put that in a sentence by saying something like, by dealing with his grief, Kip is able to become a better person by providing support for those around him, becoming more determined to succeed, and developing a strong identity for himself and his family. In our prompt about the power of family, we are looking at a contention that says throughout the text, Jordan states that family is essential in providing an identity for characters. So each of our ideas needs to look at how and why identity, particularly identity drawn from family, is important. So the ideas that we've established, the ideas that I've included in this sentence include that identity protects you against societal pressures. If you have these traditions and these norms that are in that zone of the family, and they protect you from those societal pressures, just like Charlotte. The second one is that having a family that's having an identity that's tied to family establishes a tradition of self-respect. Like when Kip says to Francis that he needs to respect Annabelle. That's an example of that tradition of self-respect that is established early on and that ends up following down into his family. And then we have self-respect, which is imbued in Alex when he actually goes and he visits his grandfather. The third one is just the idea of providing a home that individuals can turn back to. And it's that home which is symbolic, but it's also the home that is that source of comfort, and that source of love, and that source of support. So how would we go about writing arguments for our target prompt? Okay, our prompt is, despite the experience of loss, the characters find ways in 9 days to make life meaningful. Discuss. Okay, our prompt is about the experience of loss, and how it leads to life being meaningful. And we have said here that the ways that the characters are drawing meaning is through the character's drive and determination. So the characters experience loss, that leads to drive and determination, and that becomes a source of meaning for them. Number two, the characters seek love as a consequence of loss, and that love, despite tragedy, despite grief, despite pain, becomes a source of meaning. And third, they're pushed for self-actualization. Self-actualization just means developing and constructing your own identity. It's just seeking that identity and actually capturing it. So due to experiencing loss, they gain a determination to develop an identity, essentially, and it's that identity that gives their own lives meaning. So how could we put those three ideas? Remember, those three ideas are going to form your topic sentences for your body paragraphs. We'll say something like, this meaning is explored by Jordan through the character's drive and determination, their ability to seek love despite tragedy, and their push for self-actualization in the face of adversity. So we have, firstly, introduce the text. Secondly, we've made reference to the prompt. Thirdly, we've outlined the contention. And lastly, we've just listed our 3 arguments. So what does that all look like when it comes together? It looks like something like this. Tony Jordan's novel 9 Days explores how loss impacts 4 generations of an Australian family. Introduction of text. Jordan is able to detail how life is made meaningful for individuals despite loss by exploring the individual perspectives of 9 different family members. That's your reference to the prompt. Tension. 9 Days details how each of the characters is shaped by the consequences of love, and it is these consequences, both positive and negative, that provide meaning for the characters throughout their lives. This meaning is explored by Jordan through the characters' drive and determination, their ability to seek love despite tragedy, and their push for self-actualization in the face of adversity. This is color-coded, obviously. You can see that the blue section is that introduction of the text. We have a little bit of a reference to the prompt, but it's onto the second sentence that we really just say, this is what I think it means. In this case, Jordan is detailing how life is made meaningful because of this. In blue, the light blue color there, we have a contention, which says that the consequence of loss, both negative and positive consequences, are what actually provides meaning. And then we're talking about the 3 ideas in that sentence at the bottom. In red, we have the idea about the character's drive and determination is providing that consequence, and also that meaning for the characters is their ability to seek love despite tragedy. And thirdly, it is their self-actualization in the face of adversity. Now, if you are confused about how I've got here, please come and see me and I will have sit down with you and I will go through each of these steps. Lastly, you will have noticed that in each of the examples, they all related to a similar prompt or a similar idea. So I'm going to go over what those combined examples would have looked like when we put it all together. For the Kip grief example, Tony Jordan's novel 9 Days explores how the character Kip deals with the grief he experiences throughout his life. Within the text, Kip is forced to constantly struggle against the pressure of society and the consequential grief his family faces. This is explored through the perspective of various members of Kip's family. Throughout the text, Jordan makes a suggestion that Kip's grief provides a launching pad for him to become a better person. By dealing with his grief, Kip is able to become a better person by providing support for those around him, becoming more determined to succeed, and developing a strong identity for himself and his family. And this is a perfectly fine introduction that I would be more than happy to see any one of you write in your cat. So it's probably a model that we wanted to start practicing and working towards. And please, get the chance, write an introduction, write just the sentences out and send them to me via either email or by OneNote. Lastly, and this is what I'll leave you with. This is the last sample. It was about family and power. Jordan's novel 9 Days explores the dynamics of a family over multiple generations. Within the text, Jordan states that family is essential in providing an identity for the characters. Throughout the text, Jordan states that family is essential in providing an identity for the characters. This identity demonstrates the power of family by constructing supports that protect against societal pressures, establishing a tradition of self-respect, and providing a home that individuals can turn back to. Now, of course, I hope you've noted that I've used similar sentence starters, and this could be a problem. So I've said within the text, throughout the text, you probably want to change it around a bit, just add a bit of variance to your sentence structures. But overall, this has all the key components that you need in the introduction. And again, this is perfectly adequate. And this is a more than acceptable introduction that I would be willing to accept in a cat. Hopefully, from this process, you've learned the four main components of an introduction. That is, introducing the text in your first sentence, referencing the prompt in your second sentence, outlining your contention in your third, and listing or outlining your arguments in your fourth. Hopefully, from this process, you've learnt how those sentences go together and how they actually enable you to demonstrate your knowledge of the text, demonstrate that you understand the prompt, and actually lead into and prepare your assessor for your overarching contention, that is the big idea, and the three arguments that are going to form your three body paragraphs. Okay, if you have any questions, please send me an email or just come and see me at school. See you later.